Welcome back, guys. Welcome back to the ONETRIBE podcast. And we are back for another episode. And as you can see, I have a special guest in the house today. This guy is one of the boys, one of the brothers, and a very good friend of mine. And I will be going through a whole heap of stuff with this guy today. We are going to be tacking on to the back of Mental Health Month that we are just coming out of. Obviously, it's the first today, but we've just gone through it. So I wanted to get this podcast done regarding mental health. And, you know, the whole thing behind the ONETRIBE podcast is to always make sure that we are talking about mental health, whether it be industry related or, you know, just personal experiences, etc. But just, you know, if you've watched the podcast before, you know that we get, you know, different walks of life on, and everyone has had some sort of battle to where they're at now, whether it be, you know, small, major, but it all has a something to do with, you know, the mental health aspect of life. So let's introduce our first guest. This guy is known to the boys here as, you know, a big brother, even though he's a bit younger than most of us, but he's always he's one of the boys that you can rely on family wise. You know, I've got to know him really well over the last couple of years, and when we've all become a lot closer as a family unit here. And so, yeah, let's introduce our first guest, Tony SULUI, bro.
How's it?
How are you, brother? Welcome onto
Good.
the show, man. Welcome onto the show.
Thanks for having me.
No worries, brother. So we said we're gonna bang this out and get this done because, you know, that's something, obviously, mental health subject that both me and yourself hold close to your heart. So let's start all the way at the beginning, bro. So you were born in New Zealand, Christchurch, to be exact. So tell me a bit about your upbringing, bro, in NZ.
So I guess start off with, I was born in Christchurch, but I was raised in Wellington. It's a long story, but I'm going to try and keep it as short as I can. Mum comes from a Samoan family. She's number 10 over 11, and my grandparents grew up in Samoa and raised their 11 children. And essentially, Granddad looked around and was kind of like, there was a lot of poverty and there was a lot of things that didn't kind of add up right in his mind, and so he decided that he was going to work to get his kids out of Samoa and move them to NZ, where there was a lot of possibility. So eventually he managed to get all 11 children to New Zealand. And how do I say this? Mum got pregnant with a guy who was known to the family. From what I've been told, he was a very close friend of her brothers. There's 5 brothers, and apparently he was quite close with them. And so when they found out that she was pregnant, I think a lot of the fear that was around that news coming out, he turned to her and was like, "Look, we're not going to go ahead with this. We're not going to have we're going to have an abortion." And Mum said that she was in the clinic, and I think part of the process is that they had to find a heartbeat. And what she's relayed to me is that when she heard that heartbeat, she was just like, "I can't do it.
Not
Can't
happening.
go. Yeah, it's not happening." And so she went back and she was like, "Look, I'm going to keep this child." And essentially the next day when she went to meet him at his work, he was gone. Receptionist was like, he flew to Australia this morning. You didn't know?
Really?
Yeah. So, you know, Mum was left to face this whole challenge of bringing a child and what was happening to her on her own. She had to go and face her parents and her siblings, and a culture where, you know, it's very strict in the Christian background, where you're not supposed to have sex outside of marriage, you know, all of this kind of stuff. So that's how she ended up in Christchurch. She ran away because she felt safer to just go and do this on her own. And so the first 5 years, it was just me, Mum. Eventually, she came back to the family, and they accepted both Mum and I back. And that's where my grandparents stepped. That's why I have such a close relationship with my grandparents, because obviously I think Mum was 20, 21. And yeah, basically my grandparents raised me for the first couple of years, 5 years, and then mum met dad, the man who I consider my dad. And yeah, grew up in, that's when my two brothers and my sister came along through my dad. So my dad's Māori background. I think there's a bit of confusion there about my heritage.
Right.
So biologically, I'm Samoan, but I was raised by both my mum who's Samoan and my dad who's Māori.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, like you just telling me that. Obviously, we'll go deeper into this conversation later. But like off air, we were talking about even yesterday about even just now about 20 minutes ago, we were saying about the trauma aspect that you know before you were born, trauma can be passed down to you. Right. So that we'll keep that there, but you know we'll dive into that a little bit later. So, Samoan heritage, growing up in Christchurch, New Zealand. Did you ever get back to get much chance to get back to the islands and stuff like that?
I eventually went back to Samoa in 2000 and I think it was 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
And for the listeners who don't know much about Samoa, we have a system called the chief system where family members elect a chief to carry the responsibility of making decisions about the land. They don't carry that decision on their own. It's they represent the ainga or the family. And so I think in 2008, I can't remember which year it was, a village that we belonged to in Samoa, you know, reached out and said, hey, we need to start passing on this chief title onto the next generation. And the ainga came back together and they had a discussion on who they were going to send to take on this chief title. And I remember that family meeting because it's quite a prominent chief title. And so I heard the name being thrown around quite a bit. My mum's older brother, who you would make, you know, who would think you'd send. And then right at the end of that whānau, my granddad turned around and he was like, I want to send Tony. And absolutely gobsmacked. I didn't see that one coming.
Right.
And I think granddad did that because I was, like I said, I was very, very close to them growing up. I looked after them up until they were gone.
Yeah.
So I think the way that I look at it, because I mean, growing up in New Zealand, I didn't learn much about the Samoan culture. We weren't really raised, you know, granddad moving our family out of Samoa was essentially to give us a better life, you know, where there's more possibilities, you know,
absolutely,
opportunities. And so we didn't really know much of the culture. And then for granddad to turn around and say, hey, look, you know, this is kind of like a blessing, I guess. That's the way I see it, is like as a thank you for looking after me and grandma, you know, as you grew up. But I was just like,
how old were you?
I think I was 20.
Wow.
20, 21.
Yeah. So it's a lot of, I mean, to date anyway, you know, like you said, looking after your grandparents and stuff in your, you know, late teens, 20s, that's a lot of responsibility as it is. So you got to grow up fast, right? You grow up fast. And we touched on this. We all had breakfast yesterday. Some of the brothers and sisters, and you know, everyone's from different island backgrounds and stuff. And we did say this. It was quite funny because I brought it up. Is that, you know, I think a lot of our grandparents have moved from their respective islands. I know mine moved from Fiji to Australia to give, you know, my pop and my grandma to give a better life to their kids. You know, 9 kids, actually 10 kids, but your culture gets lost. And like you just touched on, it's like we didn't grow up with too much culture in terms of our backgrounds and where we came. We always knew that we had brown skin or we were a little bit different there, and the food was different that we ate in the evenings and stuff like that. But in terms of like retrospective culture, we weren't taught that much. Now, like you're living, you know, the New Zealand way or the Australian way, this is where you live. So, and there's no fault to our grandparents or our parents. It's just they were there for a better life. They almost not forget about their old life, but they're also adapting to this new style of life. So, you know, when they have kids and stuff, they don't, no one, you know, teaches you how to be a mum or dad. So they're just trying to do the best for you and maybe also imitating what's around them. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? With the Western culture or the white culture that you grow up predominantly around, your parents are probably going, oh, if they're doing it, that must be the right way to do it. So you do things like that.
Yeah, I mean, like I think they were learning as they were going.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, and there was always this pull push kind of thing where I would go to school, and at school I was a fob.
Yeah.
I was two islander.
Yeah.
You know, I was identified by the color of my skin,
Yeah.
and that's how I was seen.
Yeah.
And then when I came home to the family, to the ainga, to the whānau, I'm speaking English and I'm picking up the European way of life.
Right.
I'm now considered a whipalangi.
Yeah.
Like you want to be white. Like what are you trying to bring here? And so it's this confusion of like, well,
where do I stand?
Where do I fit in this picture? Like, who am I? Like at school, I'm two islander, and at home, I'm too white. Like,
right.
It's this confusion.
It's crazy, you know? Right? So great. Yeah. I mean, like for anyone sort of listening to that, it's a tough one. And I you know, I think for me, it was a little bit different. I was saying this around the table yesterday is that, you know, I didn't see color growing up. So like, it was just, I guess it was just our group of friends back home growing up were from everywhere, you know what I mean? So, you know, you had brown, white, you know, you had Asian influences in the group, and you were just all one, which was awesome. You know what I mean? I look back at that now, especially in 2021, you go, so lucky to have that mindset because the segregation now is crazy. It's crazy. Even, you know, whether you live overseas or back home, it's, you know, it's going back to almost the way of the 70s and 80s when our grandparents migrated from these islands. They were sort of segregated, you know, a little 100%. Bit, but yeah, bro. So like you've had to grow up fast going through high school and in your late teens, looking after your grandparents, etc. Mm-hmm. Where did you sort of like, obviously, did you base yourself out of New Zealand, or did it until you left to travel? Mm-hmm. Was this Emirates your first going into that, right? So you then, what age did you leave New Zealand?
I didn't leave New Zealand until 2014, so I was 27
right
at the time.
So Emirates was the first job, like overseas,
internationally. My journey to Dubai, to the UAE, kind of came off the back of a lot of things kind of converging and overlapping. I had gotten myself into a relationship that was extremely toxic. Not that the person was toxic, but I lived my life trying to serve
this person.
Not this person, everyone else.
Right.
I had lived my life trying to ensure that my parents were happy, that my grandparents were happy, that I ensured the overall look of the ainga had been kept, you know. And being successful in school, and there was a lot of pressure to live up to all of these expectations that were put on you. And so I fell into a relationship that naturally matched that level of confusion. You know, like I was confused in my head, and I linked up with this person who was just as confused, and it was just like explosive. It was not a good relationship to be in, and in a sense I ran away. Things started getting too serious for me. And so that's how I ended up. My family had already, by that stage, they'd moved to Melbourne.
Right, that's what I was going to touch on. So you did say that your parents are now in Melbourne. So they had transitioned from New Zealand over to Melbourne. You are just getting out of this toxic relationship, and so you decide to go, well, if you're going that way, I'm going to go and explore the world.
Well, essentially that's how it happened. Like when my family all moved to Melbourne, I was like, I think this is my ticket out. Like I think I can, and I basically said, I'm going to look into moving to Melbourne. And at that particular time, the job market that I was trying to get into wasn't really similar. In Australia, it wasn't similar to what I was used to in New Zealand. And so that's when I kind of like broadened my horizons. So I was like,
so what were you doing like in that time? Like after high school?
After high school, I went and started working for Air New Zealand in sales. Corporate sales. And so that's kind of like I've been in the airline industry ever since I left high school. And so I was kind of trying to get into a very similar role in Australia, and I couldn't kind of find a similar thing in Australia. So I kind of broadened horizons. I was like, I just literally just started applying for random jobs. Like I just sat there and was like, apply. apply. And I saw this Emirates gig, and a lot of people had always told me like, you'd make a good flight attendant. And I'm not sure if that's an insult or a compliment.
Yeah.
But they were like, you make a good flight attendant, you should try it out. I was like, it was never me. Like I always thought that the furthest I would ever travel in my lifetime was Australia and possibly the Pacific.
Yeah.
That was the limitation that I'd set in my mind.
Yeah.
And so I saw this Emirates gig, and I thought in my mind that what I was applying for was a flight attendant that only operated Melbourne, Dubai, back to Melbourne.
Right.
And so I applied for the job. They're like, come along, got through I turned up to this interview process, and there was about 300, 400 people there. And I had literally had no idea what I was getting myself into, like zero clue. I knew nothing about Emirates. I turned up with a beard, no tie, open collar, scruffy as, just scrolled in, and then there's all these guys there, like clean shaven, ties up here, suits on, and I'm just like, people told me at the interview, like, you're not going to get this. And I was like, it's a joke. I'm just here because by chance. Somehow got through to the final stage. They give me a call and they're like, so we'll offer you the position. And I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, yeah, when can you move to Dubai? And I was like, well, when can you have me? And they're like, November. I was like, okay. I hang up the phone. I'm just like,
am I moving to the Middle East?
Did that just fucking happen? What?
It
took me, even when I got to Dubai, I still remember walking out to the airport, and I was just like looking around like, well, how did I end up here? It was a lot to process. And I was essentially, because when you're running away from something, you're not looking where you're going.
No, exactly. It's blind, right?
Yeah. And essentially that's how I ended up here. I was running away from the chaos of my life that was back home.
But to be fair, I mean, like you just said, you've had so much responsibility to the time you were 20. You're ready to check out and have a break. And at that age, I guess, you don't know, it's autopilot. If you've been told, you just take over. Things take over. You grow up fast. You sort of miss out on a teens childhood that you should have had because there were so many things going on. So, you get to Dubai, you think, right, here's my break in terms of mental break, right? Right. So you get off the plane, you get to Dubai, and now you're here. So tell me a bit about your career with Emirates, bro.
I still remember the first flight that I did when I think it was London Heathrow, and I was just shocked. Because it's what they described to me in the interview didn't necessarily translate to what we were actually doing.
Right.
I don't think I'd mentally prepared myself to be everything that people needed on an aircraft. Essentially they need, somebody who can revive someone if they're having a heart attack.
You basically need to almost wipe their ass for them, right?
Literally. You need to know, you literally need to know how to deal with people on every level. You've got, I've come from a place where I'm so comfortable and so used to, New Zealanders. And now I'm dealing with cultures that some of them I'd never heard of before, and I'm like, it was mind blowing. And I remember after my first London flight, I came into Costa and I sat there for 3 hours straight, just staring into blank air, because I was like, what the fuck have I done?
Yeah.
I've literally uprooted my life, ran away from New Zealand, and now I'm in some foreign country. And I didn't even know this country was a Muslim country. I remember the phone call that I had from my mom when I told her I was going to Dubai. She's like, it's a Muslim country, right? And I was just like, oh, is it? Literally knew nothing. This is what I mean. When you're running away from something, you don't know.
It's funny you say that, because I think with this place, and look, let's just go back to the cabin crew thing. I think a lot of people have the wrong idea about cabin crew. Everyone I know is and you've had this before, is that, oh, you guys are so lucky, and you get, and which,
for sure.
there's a bit of truth to that. There is. 1,000,000%. You get to see the world, you have experiences that you'll never have in your life. But then there's another side to the job. And, you know, to touch on the mental health aspect of that job and what I know, I'm a civilian and I've got so many friends, you know, like you who have been through the job or are still in the job. The mental health aspect of cabin crew life is on another level. And when I say another level, it's damaging, bro, on another level, you know what I mean? So, you know, for the listeners out there, if you're going like, you know, you get on a plane and it's exciting as a passenger and you go, hey, I got a holiday destination and, you know, I've paid for my ticket and I deserve. It's my right almost. That attitude I feel needs to be just rid of, you know, it's okay. You've paid for a ticket, but you don't also have the right to treat these people like shit. You know,
my perspective on that is that I think a lot of it comes down to what companies promise their passenger or their client. You know, they're only seeing on advertisements, you know, the shower spa or the lounge, and they purchase this ticket, which is quite expensive, and they get on the aircraft and realize actually what I saw was only business class and first class, and I've only got a ticket to economy. And so I think that's where, you know, you've got to deliver what you're promising your customers, you know, and I don't think it's unfair for someone who's paid however much money, 3,000, 4,000 dirhams to travel somewhere to ask for things. It's the manner and way which people ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the biggest 100%. Issue for me. Like, I get that, you know, you've purchased this ticket and you're expecting a level of service that you were promised from the start. And I'm trying my best. Like, the thing is, like, a sense of humanity goes out of it. Like, people don't see that I've got 300 people to serve, you know, and all 300 of them want something from me. And I'm trying to like compose myself. And, you know, you got to have this image where you're smiling and you're like,
you know, you got to bite your tongue.
Yeah, you got to bite your tongue. And it's just the way people forget that, yes, I'm the image, but I'm also a human being, and there's no need to be a dickhead.
Yeah.
You know.
No, absolutely.
That's my view on it anyway.
So yeah, let's touch on that a little bit. So how long were you with Emirates?
6 years.
6 years, right?
You know what? Like, yeah, so there is an element of the job that shocked me. But if I look back at those 6 years, I wouldn't trade them for anything. They were the 6 years of my life that I grew the most and I learned the most about myself. Yeah. And it was through meeting people from all sorts of walks of life, you know, people from different backgrounds. So people who are so different to me. The aspect of being in countries that I'd never even met, like I said before, I always thought I was going to just travel to Australia and the Pacific. Yeah. And then to be standing in New York, Times Square, where you literally, and as a child, only seen this in movies, your mind is blown. You know,
you guys, as I said, like, you know, even living through you guys, some of your stories, it's, you get to see some of the stuff people on this planet will never, ever get to see. And that's amazing. And the friendships you guys have made. Look, we just went through, I know like this was pretty public this year, last year, that we lost probably what, you know, probably for you more, but like, you know, 30 to 40 good, close family friends that we've made in the last 10 years, 15 years more, were gone and uprooted. And, you know, I'm so happy to know that everyone's okay and in good places now and sort of moved on with their life away from Emirates now. And it's probably in some aspect a blessing for half of those guys, you know what I mean? Even for yourself, bro, you know what I mean? Like, because it was such a comfortable way as well to live. It's very hard to change that, you know. It's like that why fix it if it's not broken mentality, you know what I mean? So obviously with what happened during the pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs. Tony, bro, you were one of them. And you've ended up staying on in Dubai. So let's talk about that whole like pandemic year and the crossover and transition there, bro. Like,
so about, I think it was 2019, to the start of 2019, I had essentially started to check out of the job. I like my body, like there's a certain limit to your body that you can drag it through, like the jet lag, the fatigue, the
sleeping patterns,
so messed up. The mental exhaustion of going to work at 3 a.m. in the morning, like you're taking off at 3 a.m. You have to check into work at 1 a.m. and you're taking off at 3 a.m. and then you're serving 300 people on a 15 hour flight. and then you're on a layover for 24 hours and you repeat it all the way back. Then you have 2 days off to try and catch up and then you're off again.
Yeah.
So after 5 years of doing this, like while it was one of the most phenomenal times of my life, like I would never trade that experience for anything else. I knew that I was coming to the end of this. I mentally was thinking, okay, this is what I want to be doing when I'm 40, 50.
Yeah.
I know that this is coming to an end. And I'd heard a lot of people in Dubai and in the UAE talk about this exit plan. It's a term that we use here. It's like, so what's your exit plan? Like, what's your exit strategy? How are you going to start phasing out? And then being caught up in the comfort, like you touched on, there's a sense of comfort, and it's not just a lifestyle. It's literally your mental state as well. When you're mentally comfortable, it's how we operate as human beings. When you're in a state of familiarity, that for your brain is, we're safe here. There's no danger. And when you challenge your mind to think, let's do something different or something unknown, the mind literally goes, well, why would we do that? Because we don't know that there could be possible risks, danger. Let's just stay here where it's safe. And essentially 2019, I was in this push pull, like, am I going, am I staying, I'm done, no, I'm not done, and then the universe just came through and was like, I'll do the decision for you. You're gone, you're out. And when I got the news, essentially it came as a shock because the decision was taken from me. If I would have preferred to have made the decision myself, but looking back, I know that the universe conspired to be like, this guy's never going to get off his ass. He's going to be stuck here. He's going to stay in his comfort zone for the next 10 years if we don't shove him.
And you say that, and I look at our demographic of friends who did get that email in those couple of weeks, and I feel like you said, if it was the universe playing a part in this, the universe played the part to the right people, because just like you, a lot of our friends were in that comfort factor. Like there was guys here for like 12 years, you know what I mean?
A lot longer than I have.
Absolutely. So it definitely, like you said, was the rocket that was needed up a couple of your asses to get you guys to look at things a different way. You know what I mean? Now let's touch on the mental health side of that. Obviously the pandemic year for everyone, well, fuck, it's still going, but like that whole lockdown phase of the world not only affected you guys. I mean, flights had stopped everywhere. Ultimately, we went into a lockdown here in Dubai for like close to 3 months, right? How did all of this play a part in, if any, sort of mental stimulus or like mental health battle? Did this have any effect?
I know, I mean, I've been in touch with a lot of people who are struggling mentally because of the pandemic. Essentially what the pandemic's done is forced a lot of people to stop and be stuck in between four walls. And for a lot of people, it's forced them to actually listen to what's going on in their head. And if you're not somebody that takes care of your mental health, if you're not somebody that's used to listening to the voice in your head, that can be quite catastrophic.
Absolutely.
I know that mental health awareness is literally skyrocketed because of the pandemic, because people are trapped in a place where they're forced, as a species, we've learned to distract our brains from the chaos that's happening in our brains through technology, through work, through whatever shape and form it is. It's a distraction. And essentially when the pandemic hit, people were forced to listen, like you have to face what's happening in your head. And I was literally just having a conversation with one of my best friends back home in New Zealand before you came over. And her and I were talking about what it did for me mentally. We haven't really tapped into my childhood yet, but essentially my childhood was chaos. That's how I describe it. It was complete chaos. And when you're someone that grows up in chaos, when you don't have predictability, when you can't predict what's coming up in your life, they call it, you become sensitized to it. And so when the pandemic hit, now that I'm looking back at it, I was already used to chaos.
Mm.
I was already used to messy.